Armenia has accused Azerbaijan of cutting off the disputed region of Nagorno-Karabakh. Azerbaijan says it's acted to stop smuggling. But why has trouble returned once again? And can EU-brokered talks succeed in bringing a long-term solution? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Adrian Finighan. The disputed region of Nagorno-Karabakh has been a source of conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan for more than 30 years. The two sides have fought several wars, the most recent in 2020. Nagorno-Karabakh is internationally recognised as part of Azerbaijan, but it's also claimed by Armenia. Now there's increased tension once again, with Armenia saying that the area has been effectively cut off by Azerbaijan. All this as the leaders of both countries are in Brussels for broader peace talks mediated by the European Union. We'll get to our guests in just a moment, but first a report from Al Jazeera's Sara Khairat.
Thousands of people are protesting against Azerbaijan's closure of the Lachin corridor. It's a main road that connects Armenia with the disputed region of Nagorno-Karabakh. Azerbaijan has accused the Armenian branch of the International Red Cross of allowing its vehicles to be used for smuggling. In a statement, the ICRC said that no unauthorized goods have been found and all cargo is subject to a customs check by Azerbaijan. People in Nagorno-Karabakh say they are under a blockade and that the road's closure is a humanitarian crisis.
There are already many people with health problems. Many communities are successively deprived of the opportunity to have drinking water. Residents of rural communities far from the capital have become prisoners, and the only connection for many with the regional centers and the capital is a phone call.
The UN's top judicial body in February ordered Azerbaijan to allow free movement of people and goods through the Lachin corridor, but that hasn't happened. The 5-kilometre road is Nagorno-Karabakh's only land link with Armenia. It's a mountainous region with a 95% ethnic Armenian population that lies within Azerbaijan's territory. It's recognised internationally as part of Azerbaijan, but controlled by ethnic Armenian forces. The former Soviet republics have fought 2 wars for control of Nagorno-Karabakh, including a 6-year war that ended in a ceasefire in 1994. Then again in 2020, when more than 5,000 people were killed. While a Russian-brokered ceasefire ended that conflict and Armenia was forced to give up much of the land it controlled, tensions have continued. Earlier this year, pro-Azerbaijani activists blocked off the road several times, cutting off the 120,000 people who live in Nagorno-Karabakh. Armenian officials accuse them of creating food and fuel shortages. The EU, Russia and the US have since been trying to find solutions in an attempt to settle a decade-long conflict. Sara Khairat for Inside Story.
So let's bring in our guests for today's discussion. From Yerevan, we're joined by Richard Giragosian, who directs the think tank Regional Studies Centre. From Baku, Esmira Jafarova, who is on the board of the Centre of Analysis of International Relations. And from Istanbul, we're joined by Matt Bryza, who's a former US ambassador to Azerbaijan. Thank you all for being with us. Richard, let's start with you. Azerbaijan says that the corridor, the Lachin corridor, was being used for the illegal transfer of goods and that Armenian militias are present in Nagorno-Karabakh, so its actions are justifiable. What's your response to that?
Well, unfortunately, it's a bit disingenuous. This is now entering the 7th month of an ongoing blockade of Nagorno-Karabakh, imposed since last December. But I would actually cite the United States and the European Union, which are on the record in terms of expressing concern over a worsening humanitarian crisis. And it's just that, humanitarian and a crisis.
Esmira, what do you make of that? Azerbaijan is being disingenuous here. Armenia says that that the Lachin corridor is illegally blocked, that the measures are clearly planned, and are aimed at creating conditions incompatible with life for the people of Nagorno-Karabakh who are being subjected, quote, to ethnic cleansing. What's your response?
I would say this is absolutely ridiculous to call it ethnic cleansing. First of all, because Azerbaijan has not imposed any blockade. And Lachen is part of Azerbaijan's territory, which was returned to Azerbaijan as a result of the 44-day war back in 2020. And Azerbaijan's absolute right is to maintain control over its borders. And no country should be blamed for wanting to maintain control over its border, especially the borders which were being used for illegal activities. For example, like feeding the military material and all the military transportation material to the remaining Armenian militias in the parts of Azerbaijani territories that are currently under supervision of the Russian military forces. And Azerbaijan has given warnings about this for a long time, that Lachen Road is being used for military purposes, for illegal smuggling of Azerbaijan's mineral resources that were being exploited for a long time. However, these warnings were not heeded. Lachen Road is supposed to be used only for humanitarian purposes and civilian purposes. Unfortunately, this didn't happen. So what Azerbaijan did finally in April, it finally established a border control post in Lachen Road, which is working. And if you go to online social networks and everywhere, you can see the videos of Armenian residents passing peacefully through these territories, through the border control post, provided that it is being checked whatever is being brought to Azerbaijani territories. So there's no room for illegal activities now, no room for smuggling any mineral resources of Azerbaijan or any armaments to Armenian militias. So I think this is just the frustration of Armenian side, because Azerbaijan has finally maintained its control over its borders. So it's none of the a situation that Mr. Giragosian described. So we cannot talk about ethnic cleansing. By the way, this was also substantiated by the International Court of Justice ruling, which rejected Armenia's the demands against Azerbaijan. So it's not whatever they want to portray it as.
I'll get to Matt in just a moment, but I want to give Richard a chance to come back on what you've just heard there, Richard.
Well, I would add that it's most distressing and disturbing that this is now 7 months of an escalation that includes the cutoff of natural gas, the interference of electricity. And regardless of the issue, the bigger outcome is more distressing in that these actions by Azerbaijan do very little to inspire confidence in any opportunity for post-war peace. And it's the International Committee for the Red Cross and the small contingent of Russian peacekeepers that are the only ones with free access in and out of Nagorno-Karabakh. But unfortunately, the latest escalation has directly impeded even the Red Cross.
Matt, we had talks last month in Washington. There's this trilateral meeting between the President of the European Council, Armenia's Prime Minister, and Azerbaijan's President in Brussels this weekend. What hope is there that these two sides can ever achieve a long-lasting, sustainable peace agreement?
Well, Adrian, I'm a perpetual optimist. I mean, I had to be as a diplomat, but there have been moments of dark pessimism in my own mind when it comes to the Karabakh conflict. But now I think the momentum is positive and quite strong. You have clearly President Aliyev, who wants a peace agreement, and Prime Minister Pashinyan of Armenia, who also does. Prime Minister Pashinyan made a remarkable declaration a few weeks ago saying Armenia recognizes the territorial integrity of Azerbaijan, and on a scale that includes Karabakh and the area where Armenian troops are still present. That's remarkable. Similarly, I think we've seen Charles Michel, as you mentioned, President of the European Council, and Antony Blinken, U.S. Secretary of State, also expressing not just hope, but optimism that as long as both sides continue to show goodwill, that a peace treaty is within reach. But there are opponents, there are radicals on both sides, but I think particularly in Armenia, Pashinyan faces an uphill battle. His popularity has plummeted since he signed on to the ceasefire statement that ended the military phase of the Second Karabakh War. And there are a lot of extreme nationalists who I think really don't want there to be a peace agreement. I think the vast majority of Armenian citizens, however, do want a peace agreement. And so I think that's why we've seen Pashinyan show such courage and continue pressing ahead for that agreement. The key, of course, is for situations like the one along the Lachin corridor to de-escalate and to get to a point where the controls and the flow of people and goods are going at a normal pace. I hope we'll get there.
Esmira, what does Azerbaijan want from these talks? What would a solution to the Nagorno-Karabakh question look like to Azerbaijan?
Well, solution to, I wouldn't say Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, because our position is that the conflict is over, and now we want to work on the post-conflict normalization and establishment of bilateral relations with Armenia. By the way, the draft peace treaty that is being currently discussed is also called the normalization and establishment, peace treaty and normalization of the establishment of bilateral relations with Armenia. Our expectation, first and foremost, is the mutual recognition of sovereignty and territorial integrity of both sides, and I cannot understate this enough. And we are ready to recognize, and we have recognized Armenia's territorial integrity, and so did Armenia. They also recognized Azerbaijan territorial integrity during the last meeting between the leaders of the countries with the mediation of the European Union. The territories have been recognized in terms of figures, figuratively, like 29,800 for Armenia, 86.6 for Azerbaijan. So in theory, they have recognized their territorial integrity, including Armenia. And we have heard from Mr. Bryza, and I subscribe to his words, that Mr. Pashinyan has also been vocal about expressing his support to Azerbaijan's territorial integrity. The problem is that there are revanchist forces in Armenia who do not want peace. And for us, in order to achieve a peace, again, as I said, and I cannot repeat this enough, is the recognition of territorial integrity. And these revanchists would like to manipulate with the idea of territorial integrity and stipulate that, well, territorial integrity for Azerbaijan excludes Karabakh, and for Karabakh there should be some other arrangement. This is unacceptable for Azerbaijan. Therefore, we think the number one perspective and number one precondition is the recognition of territorial integrity of both countries. And I think we are very close to that. We are close to that, but we have to make sure that those revanchist forces do not disrupt the entire process. And I want to come back to Lachin Road issue. Mr. Giragosian mentioned again that even ICRC is prevented from moving through the Lachin Road. That's absolutely not true, because Lachin Road has been opened from the very first day for all humanitarian purposes, including for ICRC vehicles. And all the Armenian patients have been moving back and forth from Lachin Road. By the way, recently the ICRC vehicles were captured transferring and smuggling illegal goods that were undeclared according to Azerbaijan's legislation. So we can see that even ICRC can be a subject for manipulation, unfortunately.
So the ICRC disputes that, though. They say that there were smuggled goods.
They said that there were individual drivers and they were punished, but they didn't rule out the fact that it actually happened. So it actually shows that there is an absolute necessity to install border control points there, because as we see, the illegal activities still continue, unfortunately.
Okay. Richard, of course, at the centre of this is an unfolding humanitarian crisis. Armenia's foreign minister wrote on Twitter this week that the 7-month blockade of the Lachin corridor and total siege of Nagorno-Karabakh people is having an irreversible and devastating impact on the lives of people there. He went on to claim that 2 young children have died as a direct consequence of the serious humanitarian situation, as he described it, and that in the 21st century this should not be tolerated. I want to know what daily life is like right now for the people of Nagorno-Karabakh.
Well, unfortunately, it's marked by severe shortages of food, of shortages of critically needed medicines, and unfortunately, it's a new climate of uncertainty and insecurity, where it's very much a medieval siege, if you will, reminiscent of the Game of Thrones. It's most distressing for another reason, however, that these actions by Azerbaijan tend to only undermine the Armenian government as interlocutor. Moreover, it is strengthening any kind of constituency in Armenia against peace. It is dangerous and rather destructive. Secondly, the bilateral diplomacy is very much that, bilateral. It's between Armenia and Azerbaijan negotiating an interstate peace treaty. It's not directly related to Nagorno-Karabakh. This also tends to exacerbate concern, not for the peace treaty, but for the day after the peace treaty. I'm greatly worried about the necessity to invest in a durable, lasting peace. And this current blockade actually creates a new environment of uncertainty that directly threatens any kind of hope for a durable peace.
Esmira, do you want to come back on that? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. First of all, about those kids that died, unfortunately, there was a police report, by the way, distributed that these kids unfortunately died because of heat. They remained in the closed environment in the car and they were suffocated because of the heat. So I understand that Armenian side would like to use this fact as a propaganda to use against Azerbaijan and again to tout about this quote-unquote blockade issue, which, as I said in the beginning, which was totally and unconditionally refuted also by the International Court of Justice. This wasn't the case. Mr. Giragosian also spoke about the negotiations and peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan happening, which potentially is excluding Karabakh. Well, you see, that's what I said in the beginning, that for us, for Azerbaijan, it's number one issue that Armenia recognizes Azerbaijan's territorial integrity, including Karabakh, within the boundaries that Azerbaijan and Armenia became independent after the Soviet Union disintegrated. So Karabakh was part of Azerbaijan, and Armenia has to recognize, which, by the way, they did recognize by recognizing Azerbaijan's territorial integrity figuratively within the borders of 86.6 thousand square kilometers. However, the fact is that they would like to manipulate with the idea that territorial integrity for Azerbaijan exclude Karabakh, which is unacceptable, absolutely unacceptable.
Okay.
But I'm sure that Armenia will get there, and that we are still working towards peace, and these issues will be also ironed out at some point.
All right. I can't at this moment in time verify what you say about the kids. All I can do is report what Armenia's foreign minister wrote on Twitter, and there's your version of events as well. Matt, again, you say the momentum is positive here towards peace. I just wondered, does Russia still have any role in bringing about peace between the two sides and keeping the peace? Is it possible? You've got these talks at the moment going on, as we said, in Washington and over the weekend in Brussels. The Vatican's Secretary of State even visited the region earlier. But is it possible to reach any kind of lasting settlement without Russian engagement?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, if you asked me this question when I was the U.S. mediator of the Karabakh conflict, and I had a Russian ambassador, a counterpart, and a French one, then I would have said no. Russia, of course, is the biggest regional player and has, at that time, had been quite constructive in helping the two sides come closer and closer together with our joint mediation. But that all changed with Russia's second invasion of Ukraine last year. It's impossible to conceive of a country that is committing war crimes, perhaps crimes against humanity with one of its neighbors and being a peacemaker with two of its other neighbors. It's just inconceivable. On top of that, President Putin is now seen as being so politically weakened by the Giragosian mutiny that he really doesn't have much clout in Azerbaijan and Armenia. Having said that, though, I think the leaders of Azerbaijan and Armenia realize that it's important not to humiliate President Putin. So from time to time, Putin convenes the leaders and they make progress at those discussions. But the real action is happening in the talks that are brokered by EU Council President Michel and U.S. Secretary of State Blinken.
And who then? I mean, should it be Russia? Continue to be Russia? Who should keep the peace once a lasting peace deal is reached?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are Russian peacekeepers on the ground now, originally 1,900 of them. And that's because Russia had the only potential peacekeeping force that was ready to be deployed immediately on November 10th, 2020, when the military phase of the war ended. But throughout my period as the U.S. mediator, we, the U.S. and France, always rejected the idea that the final peacekeeping force could be Russian. There's a rule of UN peacekeeping that you never have peacekeeping troops from combatants in the conflict or from neighboring states, and Russia's obviously a neighboring state. So we had always foreseen that the OSCE, for example, would invent a peacekeeping force. So I think now there's going to have to be some sort of ad hoc arrangement that's mutually agreed by Azerbaijan and Armenia. Russia will oppose any peacekeeping force that is not Russians, but I think probably Russia's vote is not going to mean as much now as it would have in the past.
Matt, just thinking aloud here, how does the regional rivalry between Turkey and Russia play into this right now, particularly considering recent events with Turkey appearing to snub Russia over the war in Ukraine? And would a thawing of relations between Armenia and Turkey benefit the whole region and the situation as a whole? Or am I straying into the realms of fantasy and wish thinking there?
Oh, not at all. I mean, in terms of normalized relations between Armenia and Turkey, those two countries have been working on that for a long time. I mean, since basically the end of the Second Karabakh War. But Turkey never wants to move faster than makes Azerbaijan comfortable. And so now Azerbaijan, I think, is comfortable. It wants to see Armenia restore its trade ties and transportation ties, both with Azerbaijan and Armenia, as a way to lay the foundation for lasting peace. The Lachin corridor dispute is something separate. I mean, major reintegration of Armenia into the regional economy, I'm convinced, is something that both Baku and Ankara want. And of course, that would be great for regional stability, unless you're Russia or Iran that want to play their own specific games and keep maybe the conflicts bubbling a bit. As far as Turkey and Russian relations are concerned, you know, Turkish leaders and the Turkish people know they fought more wars against Russia than any other country throughout Ottoman and Russian and imperial history. So the Turkish side never wants to back down in front of Russia, and therefore has been a strong supporter of Ukraine, but nor does it want to provoke Russia unnecessarily. And therefore, Turkey has not joined the sanctions against Russia, nor has President Erdogan come out as vociferously attacking or criticizing President Erdogan as, say, has President Biden. I think Putin actually respects Erdogan's approach. And keep in mind that Turkey does have a small contingent of peacekeepers on the ground in Azerbaijan, much smaller than the Russian one. But those Turkish peacekeepers are really their eyes and ears for NATO, I think, to help keep the Russian peacekeepers honest.
And Richard, I just want to expand upon something you touched upon in a previous answer about what the future holds for these two countries in terms of their coexistence. They're neighbours, they can't avoid that fact. Do you see any hope of a reconciliation or rapprochement? You said it yourself, you worry about what happens after a peace treaty is signed. Why?
Well, specifically, I would rule out, unfortunately, the possibility for reconciliation or rapprochement anytime soon. However, Armenia's approach to both Turkey and Azerbaijan is based on pursuit of normalization, diplomatic relations, and normalizing the situation as the basic first step or currency in international relations. This is very much realistic. However, I'm concerned regarding Azerbaijan's use of territorial demands against Armenia proper, the rather understandable but dangerous use of bellicose rhetoric from the Azerbaijani authoritarian government. I'm worried that the absence of genuine democracy will be an impediment to ensure a lasting peace. Moreover, I do think that this is a time for de-escalation. In other words, if, as our Azerbaijani guest has noted, if Azerbaijan is correct and the conflict is resolved and the negotiations are no longer about Nagorno-Karabakh, then lift the blockade, engage in dialogue with the elected representatives of Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh. The Armenian government's position is also much more moderate in this regard.
Esmira, Are you optimistic that a peace deal can be done and soon, and that it will last?
If I can just jump in on a few of the issues. Well, Azerbaijan is very optimistic that reconciliation can happen. And we are working on, again, a program on reintegration of Armenian population of Azerbaijan to Azerbaijani society. Based on our constitution, they will have all the rights ensured. And I don't want to be pessimistic like our Armenian guest expressed his ideas. I'm sure that Azerbaijani and Armenian population can live together. They have lived together for many decades. During the Soviet times, they lived together in the third countries. They can live together in Azerbaijan as well. I think this is a very deterministic statement to say that reconciliation cannot happen. It can happen and it will happen. And mark my words also that Azerbaijan wants to talk to its Armenian residents. And there was already one meeting in Khan Kendi with Armenian residents and Azerbaijan representatives. And unfortunately, the next invitation extended by Azerbaijan to Armenian representatives were turned down because they were kind of dictated by those separatists in remaining in liberated Azerbaijani territories, because they wanted to speak only with the presence of Russian peacekeepers. So
Esmira,
we are open for dialogue.
I'm sorry to cut you off. We've got about a minute left. Matt, the final thoughts are yours. Do you share Esmira's optimism there, or are the three of us going to be back here this time next year talking about what went wrong?
I think we're going to be hopefully back with you, Adrian, talking about what went right. Yes, as I said in my opening remarks, I am optimistic. It's clear that the national leaders of both countries want a peace treaty. It's clear also that there's provocations to an extent earlier on the Azerbaijani side, several months ago along the Lachin corridor, when some journalists insisted on Russian peacekeepers pushing into the Armenian occupied area that's supposed to return to Azerbaijani control. The Russian peacekeepers said, no, we're not going to be part of that provocation. And now I think what we heard about with the ICRC trucks bringing in unacceptable material to Armenian soldiers who are supposed to have left already, by the way, those Azerbaijani areas, that's also a provocation. So it's time to end all those provocations and give space for the national leaders to make the difficult compromises that everybody, at least outside of the extremists, want to see happen. And I'm optimistic that that will happen.
OK, there we've got to end it. Many thanks indeed, Richard Giragosian, Esmira Jafarova and Matt Bryza for being part of today's Inside Story. And thank you for watching. You can see the programme again at any time by going to the website at aljazeera.com. For further discussion on this issue, join us at our Facebook page at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And, of course, you can join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle at AJ Inside Story. From me, Adrian Finighan, and the team here in Doha. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you again. Bye for now.